Dear viewers, Assalamu alaikum. This is our medicinal chemistry lecture number 10. Today we will discuss different classes of antibiotics and their mechanism of action. So first of all, what is the role of antibiotics? Antibiotics are used to treat or prevent some type of bacterial infection. They work by killing bacteria or preventing them from spreading. Classes of antibiotics. There are different classes of antibiotics depending upon their type of action and acting. These are aminoglycosides, cephalosporins, tetracyclines, penicillins, sulfonamides, fluoroquinolones or quinolones, microlides, carbapenems, lincosamides, and glycopeptides. All these classes can be remembered by this sentence that antibiotics can terminate protein synthesis for microbial cells like germs. So A for aminoglycosides, C cephalosporins, N, C, then T for tetracycline, P for propenicillin, S for sulfonamides, F for fluoroquinolones, M for microlides and carbapenems, and then alpha lincosamides and glycopeptides. So in this way we can remember these classes of the antibiotics. Examples and type of bacteria. For these classes we have different examples of medicines or drugs. Like aminoglycosides, the medicines are streptomycin and gentamicin, and they act on gram-negative bacteria. Cephalosporins, the examples of cephalosporins are ceftriaxone and cefepime, and they act on gram-negative as well as positive bacteria. Tetracycline or doxycycline, these are the medicine and they act on gram-positive and negative bacteria. Penicillins, the examples of penicillin are ampicillin and amoxicillin, and they act on gram-negative and positive bacteria also. Sulfonamides, the examples of sulfonamide medicines are sulfamethoxam and sulfasalazine. They also act on gram-negative and positive bacteria. Fluoroquinolones, the examples of fluoroquinolones are ciprofloxacin and levofloxacin, and they act on gram-positive and negative bacteria. Microlides, the examples are erythromycin and azithromycin. They act on gram-positive bacteria. Carbapenems, the examples are meropenem, tetrapenem. They act on gram-positive as well as negative bacteria. Lincosamides, the example is clindamycin. They are gram-positive bacteria. And glycopeptides, the example is vancomycin, and they also act on gram-positive bacteria. So for remember that what kind of medicines are these present in these classes. So for aminoglycosides, they end with mycin like streptomycin, gentamicin, etc. For cephalosporins, they start with ceftriaxone, cefepime, etc. cefixime. And for tetracyclines, they end with cycline like tetracycline, doxycycline. So in this way we can remember that in which class they belong. And for penicillin, like ampicillin, cillin, amoxicillin. So cillin is the suffix, and from this cillin we can remember that it belongs to penicillin drugs. Sulfonamides, these are the sulfur drugs, so we can say that sulfa. So they start with sulfa group. Fluoroquinolones, floxacins. So they are ciprofloxacin, levofloxacin, so they end with floxacin. Microlides, they end with thromycin like azithromycin, erythromycin, clarithromycin. So these are thromycin. Carbapenems, they end with penem. Lincosimides, they also end with mycin, and glycopeptides also end with mycin, like vancomycin, etc. And the classes which act on gram-positive bacteria are glycopeptides, lincosimides, and microlides. So they start with alphabet G, L, and M. So we can remember them, G, L, M. So these are they act on gram-positive, and all these act on gram-negative, are all type of bacteria. Only aminoglycosides only act on gram-negative bacteria. Other also act on both kind of bacteria. So amino, no, negative for negative. So in this way we can remember that amino acts on gram-negative, and M, G, and L, they act on gram-positive, and other classes acts on all kind of gram-positive and negative bacteria. So in this way we can remember difference between two major classes of bacteria. Gram-negative and positive bacteria depends on the structure of the cell wall. So in the common things between gram-positive and negative bacteria is cell membrane. So it is present in both. Then periplasmic space, and then peptidoglycan. And peptidoglycan is a thin layer of peptidoglycan is present in gram-negative bacteria, whereas it is a thick layer of peptidoglycan is present in gram-positive bacteria. And then gram-negative bacteria also contain an outer membrane or outer covering of lipopolysaccharides and proteins. So this is the difference. Main difference is the outer membrane, which is not present in gram-positive bacteria. So in this way we can differentiate two types of bacteria. Action of antibiotics. So aminoglycosides class of antibiotics inhibit protein synthesis, and they act on 30S ribosomal protein RNA and 30S ribosome, and they inhibit the protein synthesis, and they are used for the abdominal infection. Cephalosporins inhibit cell wall synthesis. They are used for respiratory and urinary tract infection. Tetracyclines also inhibit protein synthesis, which is 30S ribosome, and they act on Lyme disease, and they also act on PID, which is pelvic inflammatory disease. So it is pelvic inflammatory disease, PID. Penicillins inhibit cell wall synthesis, and they are used for ENT infection, ear, nose, and throat infection, skin infection, and urinary tract infection. Sulfonamides inhibit folate synthesis, so we can remember by this 4. So sulfonamides for folate synthesis inhibition, and they are used for eye infection, UTI, and burns. Fluoroquinolones inhibit DNA. So quinolones, they have the ring structure like nitrogenous bases in DNA, so they can be remembered by this, and they act on respiratory and UTI infections. Microlids inhibit protein synthesis, and they inhibit the 50S ribosome synthesis. So in this way they inhibit protein synthesis. They are used for sinuses, ENT, respiratory infection, and pneumonia, etc. Carbapenems inhibit cell wall synthesis, and they used for UTI and abdominal infection. Lincosimides inhibit protein synthesis, which is 50S ribosome. They are used for skin and bone infection. And glycopeptides inhibit cell wall synthesis, and they are used for methicillin resistance for Staphylococcus aureus, which usually causes skin infection, and these are the resistant bacteria. And vancomycin of glycopeptides can be used for the bacteria which are resistant for other antibiotics like methicillin. So methicillin resistant Staphylococcus aureus infection, they can be treated by vancomycin, which is a glycopeptide. Summary of the antibiotics. So these are the classes of antibiotics, and then examples of these classes like aminoglycosides. The example is streptomycin, and they act on type of bacteria which is gram-negative, and they inhibit protein synthesis, and they are used for treatment of the abdominal infection. Cephalosporins, The example is ceftriaxone. They act on both type of bacteria and they inhibit cell wall synthesis, and they are used for respiratory and urinary tract infection. Tetracyclines, the example is tetracycline. They act on both type of bacteria, inhibit protein synthesis, used for Lyme disease and PID. Penicillins, the example is amoxicillin, act on both type of bacteria, inhibit cell wall synthesis, used for ENT, skin and urinary infection. Sulfonamides, sulfamethoxazones, gram-negative and positive bacteria, they inhibit folate synthesis, they are used for eye infection, UTI and burns. Quinolones or fluoroquinolones or ciprofloxacins or levofloxacin, etc. They act on both type of bacteria, they inhibit DNA replication, and they are used for respiratory tract and UTI infection. Microlids, they are azithromycin, erythromycin, etc. They act on gram-positive bacteria and they inhibit protein synthesis of 50S ribosome. They are used for sinus infection, respiratory and ENT. Carbapenems, the example is meropenem, gram-positive and negative bacteria. They inhibit cell wall synthesis, UTI and abdominal infection. Nincosamides, the example is clindamycin. They act on gram-positive bacteria, also inhibit protein synthesis of 50S. They are used for skin and bone infection. And then glycopeptides, the example is vancomycin, act on gram-positive bacteria, cell wall synthesis inhibition, used for MRSA and skin. So this is the summary of antibiotics. So thanks for watching my video. If you like my video, please comment, share and subscribe my channel. Thanks.